Hello YouTube, and welcome to the Combination Pizza Parlor / roller rink with the fewest health code violations in the tri-state area. Or as I like to call it. Horror and comedy, two genres that critics have historically neglected when it comes to discussing film as art. They both seek to incite an emotional response in us by subverting our expectations, and because those responses of fear and laughter are so universal, they both tend to be crowd pleasers. So it's no surprise that horror and comedy go together like peanut butter and chocolate. In my time as a horror fan, I've grown an appreciation for all its different subgenres, and horror comedy is definitely one of the most fun to watch. So today I've gathered my top 10 favorite horror comedy movies, plus 5 honorable mentions, into one big list for your Halloween viewing pleasure. Let the listing begin!
Hold the string! Hold the string!
Starting us off at number 10, we have Happy Death Day from 2017, directed by Christopher Landon. You take Groundhog Day, make the protagonist a hot mess, self-centered sorority girl, add in a masked slasher she has to survive against in order to escape her time loop, and there's your plot summary. Jessica Rothe is great as Final Girl Tree. She crafts this bitchy, snarky persona that makes it easy to laugh at her misfortune at first, then slowly wins you over through the movie with her sheer determination to survive. It helps that Happy Death Day already has a template for her character development and redemption arc in what happens to Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. It's a little derivative, but derivative doesn't mean bad if it works for the movie. Is the dialogue a little cheesy at times and the logic of the mystery somewhat thin? Yeah, but who cares? This is pure popcorn-munching, plot-twisting, heartstring-pulling fun. If a mostly bloodless college slasher comedy with a badass, funny final girl sounds appealing to you, then I highly recommend you check Happy Death Day out. Unspoiled, of course, if possible. Unfortunately, it's not streaming anywhere right now except something called Fubo that's like $70 a month, so you'll have to hunt down a DVD or rent it off iTunes or Amazon. Next on the list is Tim Burton's Mars Attacks from 1996.
Mars attacks.
Mars Attacks is many things. It's a loving homage and send-up of 50s sci-fi B-movies. It's a misanthropic black comedy that casts an astonishing number of A-list actors just to have them disintegrated or heads swapped with a chihuahua. And it's also a political satire, taking aim at the just let the military solve it attitude common in post-World War II alien invasion flicks. The Martians are a bunch of gloriously dickish trolls, and for 90s CGI, they've aged pretty well, probably because they fit with the camp aesthetic and tone of the movie perfectly. Bouncing around between so many different characters and locations can make it feel a bit unfocused, but for me it just adds to the chaos that Burton is going for. When it comes to B-movies and B-movie homages, I tend to prefer the ones that cram as much cinematic zaniness into their runtime as possible over the ones that pad it out with boring filler. Plus, it has Jack Nicholson as the President of the United States, somehow giving both 100% of his comedic and serious acting skills in this silly alien parody, and it is awesome.
Why can't we all just get along?
You can stream it for free with ads on the Roku channel. Coming in at number 8 is Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, the 1988 camp classic star vehicle for the Queen of Halloween.
You looking for me?
There she was, just walking down the street singing.
Elvira needs $50,000 to fund her dream one-woman show in Las Vegas, but she just told the sleazoid new owner at her TV station horror hostess job to shove it. Fortunately, her great aunt Morgana has just kicked the bucket, meaning she's about to come into a sweet inheritance. That is, if she can survive her scheming great-uncle Vinny and the puritanical, closed-minded townsfolk of Falwell, Massachusetts long enough to collect it. What follows is the most glorious hour-and-a-half barrage of quotable one-liners and double entendres known to Earth.
How's your head?
I haven't had any complaints yet. Just grab a tool and start banging. What's that perfume you're wearing? Catch of the day?
Creating a feature film's worth of material for a character who normally only shows up for a few minutes at a time on a TV screen is no easy task. Just ask anybody who ever tried to make a movie out of an SNL sketch. But if there's anyone with enough heart, wit, and self-aware shamelessness to rise to the occasion, it's Elvira. This movie is broad, unsubtle, and at times absolutely tasteless with its humor. and that's why I love watching it so much. Elvira and the uptight hypocrite townies play perfectly off each other comedically, and the messages of the movie still ring true, even more so now that Cassandra Peterson has had her big coming out moment. Be yourself, no matter how outlandish, and screw what other people think. You don't have to be ashamed of your body or your sexuality just because people tell you you should. I could hardly think of a lesson more suited for a true gay horror icon to deliver. It's currently streaming on Amazon Prime, AMC+, Tubi, and Pluto. Number 7 is 2004's Shaun of the Dead, directed by Edgar Wright and starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. Finally, a movie that answers the question, what would British people do if zombies were real? Sean is stuck in a dead-end job and just got deservedly dumped by his girlfriend of 3 years. Like any proper Englishman, he goes out to the pub to drown his sorrows, but when he wakes up, it's not just a hangover he has to deal with. It's the zombie apocalypse! There's some great comedic writing here with how the characters bicker and banter with each other in that dry English way. It's like they took them from a Clerks-inspired slacker rom-com and dropped them into the middle of a Romero movie. Speaking of Romero, there's plenty of homages here to his work and other greats from the zombie subgenre. Shaun of the Dead takes those tropes and conventions he established and riffs on them to clever effect.
Bash him in the head, that seems to work out.
It's got a good, cozy hangout vibe to it too, probably because the main characters are longtime friends and their strategy to survive is hunkering down in a pub. Not to say it goes light on the zombie bashing action. The record-tossing scene and the climax in the pub set to Don't Stop Me Now are two of my favorites, not just from zombie comedies, but any zombie movie. The only place it's streaming right now is on Peacock. It's mean, it's green, it's number 6 on our list. See it only at the... Directed in 1986 by Frank Oz and starring Rick Moranis, it's Little Shop of Horrors. I have to be honest with you, I completely slept on this movie until just last year. I'm not normally a big musical person, and this movie has been quoted, referenced, and parodied to the point where I thought, I already know the whole plot, what's the point of seeing it? When my husband sat me in front of the TV to watch it and those opening notes played, the only way I can describe the feeling I got is like someone giving you a gift you don't even know you wanted, but now that you have it, you cannot live without it. By the time Steve Martin showed up in a leather jacket to vamp and croon about being a dentist who loves to torture people, this movie earned its spot on this list. There's something about taking the creepy, campy, monster movie morality tale of the 1960 original and putting it into a 50s-style musical comedy that's just so wrong it's right. It's got catchy, upbeat music about death and dismemberment, a nice little subversive message about the dark side of the American dream and the dangers of unchecked greed, and one of the greatest feats in movie practical effects history in the form of Audrey 2. You can stream it on HBO Max or AMC+, and if you think the ending that they went with is a little too sentimental, do yourself a favor and check out the alternate one on YouTube. At a groovy number 5, we have Evil Dead 2 from 1987, directed by Sam Raimi and starring the inimitable Bruce Campbell.
Evil Dead 2.
They're back, they're deader, they're eviler, and if you missed the first one, don't worry, they remade it as the first act of this movie. Eerily similar to My Daily Life in the Pandemic, Ash Williams is stuck in an isolated cabin and constantly tormented by demons. Raimi takes a stock premise of late 80s horror and turns it into one of the most influential genre films ever by applying his now signature dynamic camera style and a whole bucket load of high-effort practical effects. You'd be hard-pressed to find a boring shot or sequence in this movie, and the humor comes from just how intentionally over-the-top everything is.
Once in my fruit cellar. Someone with a fresh soul.
There's nobody more up to the task of playing the center of the madness than Bruce Campbell, who crafts an iconic horror protagonist with an arsenal of quips, an array of idiosyncratic facial expressions, and a mastery of physical comedy. Seriously, if you've ever seen a movie where somebody had to pretend to fight themselves or some prop, you know how grown-some it can turn out.
So, when you get in there and fight with him, shake his legs around. It looks like he's killing you. Okay.
Bruce Campbell has to do this not just once, but twice in Evil Dead 2, and both times he puts so much energy into it that they're among the highlights of the movie. Evil Dead 2 is one of the most widely loved and influential horror movies of all time, and the only reason it's not higher on this list is because the top 5 is stacked with my personal favorites. The only place it's streaming is a really obscure service called IndieFlix, but I'm sure you can find a DVD or Blu-ray at your local used media store or thrift store. Ooh, now we're getting to the really good stuff. Coming in 4th place on my top 10 is 1988's Sleepaway Camp 2, directed by Michael A. Simpson and starring Pamela Springsteen as Angela.
Wait, what happened to the killer?
The first Sleepaway Camp is one of the better Friday the 13th imitators, but it does take a hard turn into homophobia and trans panic in the last few minutes. In the sequel, Angela has gone from killer camper to camp counselor. She's all better, you guys. No, really. All it took was 5 years of shock therapy. Unfortunately, the teens start acting like teens tend to do, and Angela is forced to resort to some extreme disciplinary measures. Unlike the first movie, we already know that Angela is the killer, and we're following her point of view throughout. So to keep things interesting, they crank up the dark humor.
Let this be a lesson to you. Say no to drugs.
This version of Angela is a camp horror masterpiece to me, and if I had to say why, it'd be her combination of awkward innocence and casual malice. It's the twisted humor in having her smile just as wide, whether she's leading the Happy Camper song or throwing a mug of battery acid in someone's face.
Would you like a second cup?
Her character is also interesting to me because she's written like this ironic screw you to the moral guardians of the time. Somebody so repressed and sheltered that she murders teens for acting out and thinks that she's doing them a favor. Plus, it contains one of my favorite line readings of any movie ever.
What are you looking for? A gun? No? A drill.
This one is currently only available to rent or buy, but I have seen it on Shudder and Amazon Prime in the past. If you thought Tim Burton only had one entry on this list, prepare to be surprised, because at number 3 from 1988, it's... Beetlejuice! This movie is so widely beloved, even among non-horror fans, that originally I was just going to put it in honorable mentions and call it a day. I figure if something is so popular that it feels like a foregone conclusion to have it on my list, I might as well save the spot for something that people haven't already seen. But I rewatched it and ended up having a change of heart. This is Tim Burton at the height of his creative abilities, presenting us with his unique vision of the afterlife in a way that finds beauty and humor in the pathos of death. There's tons of lovingly crafted visual gags, charmingly weird German expressionist-inspired set design, and a score from Danny Elfman that can only be described as the most high-energy haunted house music ever. But, of course, the main reason this movie is so rewatchable is the cast. Everybody is giving career highlight performances here. Catherine O'Hara is perfectly neurotic. Winona Ryder codifies the goth girl archetype. Michael Keaton is a coked-out, charismatic creepazoid. Geena Davis provides a much-needed emotional core to the hijinks. I could keep going down the list, but instead I'll just say, here's your reminder to rewatch Beetlejuice this Halloween. Have fun with that. My second favorite horror comedy of all time comes from a somewhat unlikely auteur. It's 1992's Braindead, or Dead Alive here in the States, directed by Peter Jackson.
Your mother ate my dog!
Dead alive.
This movie is often pointed to as one of the goriest of all time, and rightfully so. It makes me wish for a universe where Peter Jackson got to keep making stuff like this and somebody else handled Lord of the Rings. Our main character is Lionel, a 20-something milquetoast Kiwi who still lives at home with his tyrant of a mother. A trip to the zoo leads to her getting bitten by the fearsome Sumatran rat monkey, and a bad case of zombification. Lionel does his best to hide his mom's necrotizing condition from her uppity friends, leading to some great gross-out humor and a scene that'll make you never want to eat custard again. But she just keeps biting people, and Lionel just keeps having to chain them up in the basement to keep up appearances. Lionel's con man Uncle Les shows up, finds what he thinks are dead bodies, and blackmails him into letting him have a party there. The whole movie is goofy and over the top in a highly enjoyable way, but it's at the climax with the party that it goes from just over the top to seriously legendary. It's like Jackson saw the rising demand for gore from horror fans through the 80s and said, I'm going to take the last 30 minutes of my movie and stuff it with as much of this as possible in as many ridiculous permutations as possible, to the point where it goes from tasteless and sick to funny as hell. Oh, yeah, and this happens.
magic ass for the Lord.
I cannot recommend this movie highly enough if you have the stomach for it. It's my favorite zombie comedy of all time. Sorry, Shaun of the Dead. It's not available anywhere on streaming or even to digitally rent or buy, but it is on YouTube in 1080p for free. Before we bring it home, here's a few honorable mentions that are still definitely worth a watch. An American Werewolf in London. People call this a horror comedy, and it's a fantastic movie, but every time I rewatch it, the scary and emotional parts stick with me way more than the humor. Killer Clowns from Outer Space, another freaky 50s alien throwback with plenty of gnarly special effects. It's basically what it says on the tin. Cabin in the Woods, a very meta parody of slasher movies and stock horror tropes, a little too up its own ass for its own good sometimes, but mostly smart, high-octane fun. Freaky. It was between this and Happy Death Day for the number 10 spot. They have the same director and a similar sense of humor, except the premise here is Freaky Friday with a serial killer. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, a gory comedy of errors that re-examines the done-to-death murderous rednecks archetype by having them be the misunderstood heroes. Alright, number 1. It's finally here, and this is the movie that motivated me to make this list. It's not just my favorite horror comedy, but my second favorite movie of all time. Written and directed by the king of cinematic trash, John Waters, it's 1994's Serial Mom, starring Kathleen Turner.
Serial Mom. Every woman wants to be wanted. Just not for Murder One.
Beverly Sutphin is the perfect suburban mom. She always separates out her recycling, she doesn't stand for foul language, and if you mess with her or her family even slightly, she'll murder you with extreme prejudice. There's a few different definitions for camp as an aesthetic, but one that I like to use is taking something just seriously enough to show how ridiculous it actually is. That's what Kathleen Turner is embodying in this role. She's completely believable both as a doting housewife and a crank-calling maniac, and she synthesizes the two into a performance that is so funny and iconic to me. I just love how she plays it so subdued and cheerful right up until she goes in for the kill and busts out a death glare that could sour milk. The silliness of the concept works because, like Waters himself, the movie is incredibly smart without being pretentious. There's so many layers of satire here. He's making fun of the American obsession with true crime, the debate around simulated violence in media, the idea of the nuclear family as a symbol of virtue, and, in particular, the assumed innocence of white women. Yet, somehow, it never gets in the way of the main objective of Serial Mom, to make you laugh. There are so many scenes and lines from this movie that get stuck in my head on a weekly basis. The opening scene, where we first realize something is off with Bev.
Look at the birds out there. Listen to their call. Oui. Oui.
The way she backs her car over her first kill to finish him off after running him down once. Pussy Willows.
Pussy Willows.
And, of course,
Suzanne Summers! This is my bad side!
I could continue, but I'll leave it at this. There should be a Nobel Prize for acting, and Kathleen Turner should win it for this movie. Alright, that does it for the list today. It was a lot of fun rewatching and revisiting all these great movies, and I hope I piqued your interest to maybe check out something you hadn't seen before. If you liked the video and want to see more, leaving a like and subscribing really helps my channel grow. If you have any suggestions that aren't on my list, have at it in the comments. By the way, the horror book review that I promised in my last video is still coming. It's just been a really busy month for me, and this video was easier to make with the time that I had. Peace out, stay freaky, and happy Halloween.